Hey, Year 8 Cultural. Over the next few weeks and until the end of term 3, we're going to be starting a new unit about the experience of different cultures and people from different cultures within our Australian society. Yesterday, you watched an episode of the series You Can't Ask That, which focused on the refugee experience. And the idea of that was to give you a bit of a warm-up into the kind of topics and kind of things we'll be talking about over the next few weeks. From today, we're going to actually be reading a series of texts, so short stories and poems and things like that, written by Australians from all different cultural backgrounds. Now, all of the texts and stories that you'll read are coming out of this series of books, which I've called the Growing Up books. You might have seen them in our library. We have all of them in our library at school, or you might have seen them in bookshops. So I'll just show and go through the different books that we're going to be reading from. So the first one is a book called Growing Up Muslim in Australia. This is one of the first ones that was actually published, and it's just a culmination of different experiences of Muslim Australians and their experience growing up here. The next book is Growing Up African in Australia, which I know a few of you might have read. I've seen it in some of your hands at school. So this is a really good sort of book that goes through the experience of people moving to Australia and also being born into Australia as an African Australian and the way that they experience our society. The next one was actually, I believe, the first in the series to have been published, which is Growing Up Asian in Australia. And this has lots and lots of stories in it, probably the most amount of stories out of all of the series. Some of them are quite short, and this is all about the Asian experience in Australia. So whether born in Australia or moved to Australia, how Australian society treats you and sees you differently. So that's a really cool one. The last one we'll be reading from is a little bit different because obviously all of these are sort of migrant experiences. This is Growing Up Aboriginal in Australia. So this is a really interesting book. It takes, it sort of takes a perspective of how, white Australian society really discriminates and is racist towards towards Indigenous Australians and First Nations Australians. So there's some really good stories in here about being young and the type of racism that's against Indigenous people when they're quite young in school, and also just as they're growing up. So these are the 4 books that we'll be looking at. And each week we'll be reading one or two of these texts per lesson, so about 3 or 4 texts a week. And I'll let you know which book each of the texts comes from, so you know what type of background and what type of person the author is. So we're really looking forward to doing this unit with you. We really hope that you enjoy it. Your assessment task for this unit will be an annotation task that's very similar to the Road to Winter annotation task that you did at the end of term 1, start of term 2, where you will read a story and annotate it with the different reading comprehension strategies. So we hope you enjoy. If you've got any questions, just get in touch with your cultural studies teacher. Cheers.